Thank you. Wow. It is great to be here with my fellow Coloradans. And this is an amazing new event that CPAC is doing. And we are really sort of a testing ground here, guinea pigs, because I think it is so important to have an event where we can be at CPAC, but not have to be in the Beltway swamp, right? And as many of you know, of course, I've been a refugee from that swamp for about 10 years. And this is a very special opportunity for me. I want to thank CCU and Dr. Sweeting and Jeff Hunt, as well as ACU and CPAC for putting this together. It is incredibly important for young people in movement conservatism to understand the importance of their role in preserving and conserving our constitutional republic. I have been out of the closet as a conservative journalist and blogger and parent and public speaker for almost 30 years now. And it was my formative years at a crazy liberal arts college that turned me into what I became. And I believe that it is the shared story, the shared narrative of so many young conservative activists for the last 3 or 4 generations, that it was the intolerance and the stifling of dissent on places that are supposed to be institutions of higher learning that brought us to a fork in the road. And it certainly was that for me. I've spoken all across the country to high school students and college students and to young people. And I've told them, I wasn't always this mouthy. I wasn't. But I came to a point where I had to choose. And this is my main message as we talk about where this movement is headed and where our country is headed. You make a choice. Who are you going to allow to speak for you? And for me, on a campus that was marinated in identity politics, multiculturalism, sabotaging the Western canon, I said, no, left-wing cultural Marxists, you do not speak for me. It was the rejection of collectivism, the rejection of anti-Americanism, the rejection of the social justice mentality that defines individuals in America by their chromosomes, or by their skin color, or by the right politically correct boxes, rather than viewing each individual as an autonomous human being. I did not want those people to speak for me. And so I had to screw up the courage to be able to look people in the eye. And I was very shy. I'd always tell people, I failed my 7th grade speech class. I choked up, I ran out of the room. I failed my assignment, I went home, and I had a tough love tiger mom who said, well, you wrote a great, wonderful, beautiful speech on paper, but if you can't deliver it, you deserve to fail. You deserve to fail. And it was on that liberal-dominated campus that I saw the worst excesses of radical leftism. And since I was back in college in the 1990s, in so many of these left-wing dominated institutions, it's only gotten worse. You know, in 2006, I wrote a book called Unhinged, Exposing Liberals Gone Wild. And I had mugshots of liberal activists who had committed the worst acts of violence and hatred in the name of love and diversity and peace. But I could not have imagined that we would see conservative speakers attacked violently, Molotov cocktails thrown on the campus of the home of the free speech movement, UC Berkeley. My college, Oberlin College, was the progenitor of the concept of safe spaces. That's right. One of my classmates was the now mayor of Baltimore, Stephanie Rawling Blake, who was notorious during the Baltimore riots a couple of years ago for saying that the mob rioters should have their own safe space. Look at every Democrat-run metropolitan city in this country. Need we illustrate any more clearly, any more explicitly, the failure of liberal ideas and ideology? How dare the left demonize good faith, law-abiding conservatives as the ones who are racist, as the ones who want to keep poor people down, as the ones who hate our children, when you look at what happens in Baltimore and Philadelphia and Los Angeles and San Francisco. Have you seen the headlines about San Francisco recently? Literally, the streets are lined with excrement and vagrants. The loss of civil order in these cities, in our country, it's by design, not accident. The chaos that we've seen, not just over the last 8 years of the Obama administration, havoc that President Trump is now trying to rein in, thank goodness. This is a long time in coming. And for those of you in this room who are informed and engaged, you understand that these Alinskyite tactics have been exercised for decades. How do we push back? Especially when it seems almost impossible to turn around these institutions on which the left has had an iron grip. Our public schools, academia, higher education, the culture, the rotten culture, Hollywood, which is now eating itself after corroding the public airwaves and cinema and theater and television for all these years. It is now eating itself. Can we declare victory? We're a long way from doing that. And though we have much to be grateful for over the last presidential election cycle and this last year, there's so much work to be done outside the swamp. One of my warnings to young people every year in the aftermath and afterglow of events like CPAC is to remember that the goal of conservatism is not to end up on a stage here. There's sort of a rock star celebrity mentality for those of you who have ever been at CPAC or plan to go. But the real rock stars are in our backyards. Because the fight is not just against the deep state, which seems far away, over there, thousands of miles away. It's the ever-encroaching tentacles, sewer pipes that have built out of the swamp in our neighborhoods, and the impact that this ineluctable growth of government has every day in our lives. And so it's activists on the ground, young people who commit to becoming city council people, Board of Education members, members of the state legislature, activists in the pro-life movement in your communities, advocates for religious liberty, private property rights. Over the last year, as a host of a show that I've done for CRTV, I've told the stories of the real rock stars of the limited government movement who are out there, commercial fishermen off the coast of Connecticut and Maine who are fighting intrusive regulations, trying to preserve their way of life for themselves and for families as they have for generations. How about here, closer to home, looking at the impact of government incompetence, environmental policy. You all remember the Animas River turning Kool-Aid orange under the Obama administration? Was it evil private companies that were responsible for that? No, it was a government contractor. And what about the double standards? If it had been a private company that was responsible for that pollution, they'd be in jail. Has there been any accountability for any of the Obama environmental officials who were responsible for that pollution? Well, the Navajo Nation, the state of New Mexico, the state of Colorado are still involved in litigation years after, and the EPA officials in the Democrat Party have skated. I think it's very important that we support this president when we have common cause against the worst excesses of the left. It is a blessing that we have a president who believes in our sovereignty and the primacy of citizenship. Do you all remember that it was just 2 weeks ago that Nancy Pelosi stood, yes, Pelosi, it's okay, get that cathartic sound, stood for 8 hours and 7 minutes in the People's House, advocating for who? Not American workers, not American families, for 800,000 to 1.8 million illegal alien so-called dreamers. Has she stood for 8 hours for the American families of victims of illegal alien crime? Has she stood for 8 hours for American workers who've been displaced by H-1B policies that were supposed to go to the best and brightest tech workers around the world, but instead result in the firing of workers at Disney or Southern California Edison, some of our best American companies, people who studied and worked hard and were the best in their industry and were forced to train their foreign replacements before getting their pink slips? These rackets would not exist without a bipartisan toxic alliance between big government and big business. And for once, in the many, many presidential election cycles that I have lived through, slogged through, fought within the right over, we finally had a candidate in President Trump who was willing to bear the slings and arrows of being labeled a xenophobe and a racist and a nativist for simply committing to putting America first. It is bewildering that we can have both Democrats and open borders Republicans declare that people who crossed the border illegally or overstayed their visas illegally or evaded deportations illegally are somehow American. How can that be? Well, since anyone can identify as anything that they want now, I am a man, I am a dog, I am an apple pie, I am a Tide Pod, right? So citizenship now is a matter of mere self-declaration. Democrats stand for the eradication of citizenship. This has always been their explicit path to a permanent ruling majority. They've been subverting our sovereignty since at least the Clinton-Gore years. Some of you in this room might remember the Citizenship USA initiative. This is where they fast-tracked naturalization of more than 1 million immigrants right before the 1996 election. They threw out background checks wholesale. They ignored the criminal records and FBI flags of more than 70,000 immigrants. And the Clinton White House whipped INS officials at the time and their field officers to process applications faster and faster and faster. Right? Instant Americans, instant votes. Well, guess what? Those of you who are students of history certainly know that conniving, corrupt government officials have been selling out citizenship for favors since the days of the Roman Empire. And how'd that go? As conservatives, we believe in the permanent things, as Russell Kirk called them. These are the inherited mores and traditions and values that undergird a civilized society and that preserve civilization for future generations. The left says we don't care about children. I've dedicated my entire career, and I know every single parent and grandparent in this room stands up for conservative values, bears those slings and arrows in their workrooms and in the courtroom and in the classroom because we care about our children. This demonization, this otherization by Hollywood, by the fake news media of us is incredibly effective, isn't it? It has been for so long, to dehumanize us, to criminalize our political dissent. That is why it is so important for young people to understand their role in this movement. It is said over and over again on the left that diversity is our strength. No, diversity as it's defined by the radical left, which means conformity, is the downfall. We stand for unity. We stand for one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. When you are feeling down, when you are feeling alone, when you are feeling under siege and the odds are against you, I would like to leave you with poetry, a little bit like President Trump had his own verses, right? Some of you may know that I am a homeschooling teacher of my 14-year-old, and I am teaching him Westerns, classics, and composition course. And one of my favorite poems is also Winston Churchill's favorite poem about Horatius at the bridge. Then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? Fight cheerfully, fight well, and never give up. Thank you very much.